Please remember to post a like, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you can always get my latest travel videos. Happy Thursday! Today I'm going to answer viewer questions about Moscow, Russia. Before I begin into the viewer questions, I'd like to address a few facts that I had to learn before I arrived in Russia, and also a few facts that I learned while I was in Russia. And the facts are that our media carries a completely different perspective of the Ukraine-Russia issue than the Russian media conveys. And you'd be surprised to know that the Russia media conveys sympathy for the Ukrainian people, and also that most Russians want this conflict to end. So hopefully that's a sign of hope for the world, but that's something our media doesn't show. The view that the Russians have is very different than the view that we have. And that's one point. And the second point that you should know, over 70% of the people on the planet Earth, over 70%, believe the Russian narrative than the American narrative. So the only countries that believe the American narrative about the Ukraine-Russia conflict is the United States media, Canadian media, British media, and Western European media. That's about it. If you go outside those areas, 70%, over 70% of the planet Earth believes the Russian perspective. So just to let you know, that's the world we live in. And I'm hopeful, as we all are, that this conflict comes to an end. But I just wanted to address that. Carolyn from British Columbia asks, I'd love to visit Russia, I'd love to visit Moscow, but I've heard from colleagues that there's armed guards everywhere that watch your every move, and that you're not free to walk around. Is that true? Carolyn, that is a complete myth. When I went to Moscow, Russia, I was free to walk around everywhere. I photographed wherever I wanted. No one threatened to take away my camera because I was photographing the Kremlin or whatever site I was at. And in fact, I even got lost on the subway, and people were helpful to get me, to locate where I was. But, the Russian police and the Russian military doesn't watch your every step. They're not there to tell you what to do when you're in Moscow, Russia. Not at all. You're free to walk around just like you are in any major city in Europe, and they really don't bother with you. It's a big bustling city, and no, you don't see that at all. So that's a complete myth. The security presence is there, but the security presence is actually less in Moscow, Russia than it is in London, England, or Washington, D.C. And if you've been to Washington, D.C. lately, you would know that the security presence is pretty high in Washington, D.C. And I've been there pretty recently, and I know that. Moscow is actually less than Washington or London, England. And so that may be a surprise to you. But yeah, what you've heard from your colleagues is a myth. Bill from Connecticut asks, I've heard that Russians are very cold and unhelpful to tourists. They don't like us. Is that true? Bill, I'm happy to say that is a complete myth. May surprise you, but Russians actually like Americans, and they don't have a problem with Americans at all, which may be surprising to you. What they don't like is Americans or Brits or anybody coming into their country with a know-it-all attitude about how their country is backwards or how their country is a dictatorship. Then they get upset and they may get defensive. But if you don't discuss politics, you'll get along just fine. The other thing that will surprise you, and it surprised me after 5 days being in Moscow, and I said that in my video number 7, I believe, is that after spending time in Moscow, Russia, I came to the realization of my own free will that Russia is not a dictatorship. It is a democracy. And I can safely say that because I've traveled to many places in the world that you've seen from my travel videos, and I have been in dictatorships. and you could just feel it, the imposing pressure of the government, and the people live in fear. People don't live in fear in Moscow, Russia. So it is a democracy, and that may surprise you, but that's what I learned when I was there, and part of the reason why I travel is to be amazed and learn something. So no, Bill, you don't need to be afraid of that. Also, Bill, you want to note that Russians are quite helpful. They're very professional. Russians don't smile naturally. They don't consider that polite to be smiling at a stranger. Americans consider that a polite gesture. Russians consider that a disrespectful gesture, to be smiling at a stranger. So that's just a body language difference, but I've walked up to Russian police officers, Russian soldiers, security people on the street, and I just asked them, different directions and stuff, and they were very helpful. People want to help tourists in Moscow, Russia. They're actually surprised that you're there during sanctions. So they actually take an extra effort to try to help you, and they'll make an extra effort to speak English to you. And one of the things you should note about Russia is Russians don't live on tourism, like the Caribbean does, or places like the Greek islands. They live totally off American tourism. Russians don't live off tourism. So they're actually being courteous to you by being helpful towards you, because they couldn't care less if you visit their country or you don't. It doesn't make any financial difference to them personally, unlike the Caribbean or some of the places in Europe that I mentioned. So they're actually quite courteous, quite helpful, just because that's just the way they are. So that's going to be a surprise to you when you go there. Audrey from New York asks about the Moscow subway. Audrey says, I've seen these beautiful images, other videos and yours, that the Moscow, Russia subway is very nice. But it seems very nice, but is it convenient? Is it easy to use? Is it okay for an English language speaking person to use? And great question. And the answer, Audrey, is absolutely, it's very easy to use. I got lost in the Moscow subway because I went the wrong way, but it wasn't because of anything else, because I've been lost on the London subway, and they have English signs in London, England. So I just didn't know which way I was going, and I went the wrong way on the subway, which happens. And I went about 3-4 stops, and I figured out I got to turn around, and I came out and I had to go a different way. And I was perfectly fine. I oriented myself. But overall, the Moscow subway, the signs are written in Russian and in English. And they've also got LED billboards. They're very easy to navigate. Plus, they have maps. And you can either download a map, or you can get one there. They have a map for free at the metro that you can just get. And plus, every station has a map. The same map that they'll give you as a tourist, and so every station has a map as well. So all the stations are named in Russian and in English, so it's very easy to navigate. Good question though. Thank you for your questions. I hope I answered all of your questions, and to the rest of my viewers, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, post a like, and hit the notification bell for future videos.